Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today at National Skills Week event. My name is Louise Robinson, and I'm the Acting Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Victoria University in the Vocational Education and Pathways section. Before we begin, I acknowledge the ancestors, elders and families of the Boonwurrung and Woiwurrung of the Kulin as the traditional owners of land on which I am presenting today. I pay my respect to elders past and present and extend my respect to Aboriginal people, staff, students and community who are present today. I also acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands which we are all meeting on from remote today. Just a couple of words about housekeeping. Today's virtual event is delivered via Zoom webinar. The session will be recorded. No attendees will be seen or heard, but there will be an opportunity to engage with the facilitators and ask questions via the chat function. We're excited to be part of National Skills Week and the opportunity to showcase practical and vocational learning. It comes at a pivotal time for vet providers when much of Australia is experiencing lockdown and technology is what keeps us connected. At VU, we have been delivering our award-winning blended learning model since 2017, and during the 2020 pandemic, we were successful in adapting our blended learning model to include flexible digital remote learning in order to continue delivering our courses. After last year's events and this year's challenges, we are well versed in innovating, pivoting and responding to evolving situations. And that same adaptive approach has been applied to this workshop today. Our initial plans for today have been reshaped due to the rapid lockdown, and we have been challenged once again to reinvent our ideas. This is very on brand for this year's National Skills Week theme, which is Rethink Your Ideas. At Victoria University and Victoria University Polytechnic, we are continuously shifting the way we think about education to break down barriers. We are increasing our focus on emerging skill-based learning, taking into consideration the advancements in technology and improving accessibility to education through our diverse programs. With our leading state-of-the-art facilities, VU Polytechnic has been able to integrate new innovative technology and facilities into our courses, like our health and community services students who have been able to upskill our world-class nursing simulation lab specialist teaching spaces that replicate real-world environments at the Sunshine Skills Hub. We continue to integrate new technology in robotics, artificial intelligence and cybersecurity across our courses and aim to incorporate new advancements into our future programs. Through our industry connections and research across higher education and vocational education, we have the opportunity to equip thousands of Victorians with the right skills they need to secure jobs in high demand industries and to meet the needs of local businesses and industry requirements. VU is embarking on its vision for the future with a strategic plan that defines the outstanding features of a dual sector university. VU's plan for doing dual differently includes an objective that we would like to become a global leader in industry-engaged education and careers. For our workshop today, we will be running an intro to design thinking. The workshop will highlight VU's collaborative approach as a dual sector with co-facilitation by our colleagues in both vocational and higher education as they presenting the theory and concepts of design thinking. Today's event will set the foundations for a future event, which we will deliver a practical workshop focused on using social robots to teach design thinking, mentality and transferable skills. Just wait to see that. After today's event, I hope that you have a better understanding of how design thinking principles and practices can be applied across different sectors, the importance of acquiring transferable skills across growing industries, and how we utilise technology to enrich our student learning experience. I really hope you enjoyed today's session. And I'll hand back over to Flick, who will be facilitating from now on. Thanks, Flick.
Thank you very much, Louise, and welcome everybody. So welcome to part one of our Breaking Barriers with Technology workshop. Today's workshop is an introduction to the concept of design thinking, how VU is currently using this process and how we propose to use it in the near future alongside social robotics. As Louise noted in her introduction of this workshop, we have had to pivot pretty quickly from our original intention, as everybody's used to over the past almost 2 years. We were going to hold a face-to-face workshop, but instead what we've done is split this into 2 parts. Part 1 is being presented online today, and we'll have a look at an overview of design thinking in our classrooms and how we've used it. And then part 2 which anyone who's attending this workshop will be later invited to view the live stream on, will be an actual face-to-face workshop where we are doing the hands-on practical application with social robotics. So before I go any further, I'd like to introduce you to your facilitators for today. So, and I'll hand over to the wonderful Natasha first to tell you a little bit about herself.
Oh, thanks, Felicity, and thank you very much, Louise. And Felicity and I both acknowledge the expertise and wisdom of Indigenous elders, past and present, on whose land we work on that was never ceded. I'm a senior lecturer in the College of Arts and Education here at VU, and I used to work as an interactive designer at the Australian Centre for the Moving Image. I was a research fellow at British Telecom UK, and I'm a registered Scrum Master. So Scrum, as we'll talk about today, is a process within the design thinking tradition, and it's basically a management process. I've used design thinking across these roles. For instance, when I worked at BT, it was to explore young people's perceptions of trust signals, and we ran exercises to think about it. But we'll tell you about what design thinking is in just a moment. And I'm here with Felicity, and Felicity is the General Manager of Industry and Growth at VU Polytechnic. Over to you, Felicity.
Thanks so much, Tash. So as Tash said, I work in the vocational education arm of Victoria University, and my background is a very diverse one. It's in all things design, from video game design, animation, traditional design, digital media, technologies, cybersecurity. I'm an Adobe expert and also project management and product development specialist. I've worked across both the education and commercial private sectors. I've led education departments as an education manager, and most recently I am leading the industry and growth team at Victoria University. So as you can see, we work across both vocational and higher education departments at VU, and at VU in particular, we like to do things a little bit differently. So we're shaking up what it means to be a dual sector institution by integrating our higher education and vocational education programs as a way of learning from one another's expertise. Before we move on, I just wanted to note a couple of quick housekeeping rules for everybody. So we do have a couple of little exercises that people will be doing, and we'll be using the chat function. If you have any questions, please also pop them in the chat function, and either Katrina or Rachna, who are our wonderful colleagues, will be moderating that today. And likewise, we'll be asking you to fill in a couple of things in the chat for some exercises, and I highly encourage you to do that. Also, if you have it in front of you, I'd encourage you to have just a pen and a paper, either if you're taking notes, but we also have one little exercise that requires you to draw something really quickly. No artistic skills needed, but just to note. Thank you very much, and I'll hand back to Tash.
So we'll be covering what is design thinking and why is it important, how is VU using it, design thinking in our curriculum, and design thinking as part of VU's doing dual differently. So what is design thinking? Design thinking is a way, a process, methodology, and tools to approach creative thinking and problem solving. This is a quote from Joe, who has done some teaching work with us. It starts with people and ends with innovative solutions tailored to meet their needs. And I have links there at the bottom to IDEO and Stanford, who are leaders in this design thinking space. Over to you, Felicity.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Tash. So before we sort of start kicking into sort of, what design thinking actually is and how it works, I want to actually start a little warm-up exercise to get you thinking in a little bit of a different manner. And these warm-up exercises are actually usually part of the design thinking process when someone starts a design thinking workshop. So it's a great way to get ideas flowing for people without any pressure. Naturally, when we're asked to think creatively, a lot of the time people put a lot of pressure on themselves to think outside the box. So these type of exercises can help kind of break the ice. So what I'd like you to do is pretend you work for a company that provides flowers to people. And what you're doing is you're looking for the best way to present those flowers to your user or consumer. So step one, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. And what I want you to do is draw a vase. It doesn't need to be artistic. You're not getting judged on your artistic capability, and no one's going to see this. But what I want you to do just in front of you is draw the first thing that comes to mind of a vase. So about 30 seconds from now. You've got about 15 seconds left. As I said, no need to worry about any artistic talent here. No one else is ever going to see this. All right, if you haven't finished up your vase, no stress. So step 2, I want you to approach this in a slightly different way. You've got it, again, about 30 seconds to a minute, so you don't have to draw this if you want. If you're not someone who likes to draw or doesn't think of things in a visual manner, what you can do is just write down some dot points. But I want you to draw or design in dot points a way for people to enjoy flowers in their home environment. So think about that question. So how would someone enjoy flowers in their home environment? That includes indoors, outdoors, etc. And again, I'll give you about 30 seconds to a minute, probably around 30 seconds. All right. So what I want you to do now that you've done that is I want you to compare your 2 drawings or your 2 ideas. So, and also for step 2, I'd love if a couple of you have got anything to pop them in the chat so other people can see what you were thinking of for your second one. Now, some of your drawings or your ideas might be similar or they might be vastly different. And Tash, if you could just flick to the next slide, thanks. So the purpose of this exercise is to show you how reframing a question to focus on a user affects the proposed solutions that you'll put forward. When we focus on a really common or generic context, we get very, very generic ideas, such as a vase. In step 1, we're asking how we want to present the flowers as an organisation. But when we're given a slightly different context, how somebody else would want to enjoy flowers, we unlock a much more diverse range of ideas. So it might be something like outdoor gardens, green walls, or as a painting. So this is the concept that sits behind design thinking. It's about thinking outside of the box. So you don't need to necessarily share what you've done, but keep this in mind as we're going through this workshop. This is what it's about. It's about reframing the way we approach a problem to look at it from the end user's point of view. So, if you aren't a traditional designer, why is design thinking so important to you? The previous exercise is an example of how design thinking can help people break out of the box and how you can come up with a whole world of creative solutions. When you approach a problem with a design thinking mentality, you're putting yourself in the shoes of the end user and designing a solution that's based on their need, not you or your organization's wants. Design thinking is all about flipping the script from what is often seen as a traditional way of thinking. Instead of focusing on finding the perfect solution before beginning, you fail fast and you iterate, continuously improving and adapting. Instead of looking for the correct answers, you find the right questions to ask that will help guide the process. Those who use design thinking well make problem solving a really active experience for everybody who's involved, whether that is your team, your workplace, your organization, students, your family, whoever you're working with, or your end user. People who use design thinking well can open their minds to innovative and really creative solutions and understand that technology in particular is not actually just a solution to a problem, it's just a tool to meet a need. By building design thinking mentality into our programs at VU and creating spaces for both our students and industry as well to practice these skills, what we're aiming to equip Australia's workforce with is a talent who are flexible, open-minded, and who focus on collaborating with others to find a solution. So if we can change the way people approach a problem, we can unlock a much broader array of solutions for people in general and for the future of our economy.
So this is the cycle of the design thinking process. For those of you who are familiar with design thinking, you would have seen this diagram before. So there's cycles of empathy, defining a problem, coming up with ideas around it, prototyping and testing. And the most important part is getting users involved in the most deepest way possible. And that's what this empathy part is about. The gold model is to have users involved from the beginning of the design process, but sometimes that's not possible. For instance, if our target audience are very young children, for instance, and then we have to work out ways to be able to get their view in by proxy. So as Felicity said, it's this alternate way of thinking about a problem and being open-minded about it. So design thinking, the philosophy, is built on the idea that everyone can continuously improve and learn. Everyone has something to offer. For instance, that your skill that you acquired 10 years ago can suddenly come into play. And there's also this idea of advocacy that, of course, is very strong in the design thinking philosophy, which is linked to how we need to get users involved. There's also a spirit of improvisation. We work with what we have, and there's the idea of DIY that's very strong. All of these values are in the Victoria University strategy and purpose for being, which is really lovely to have that alignment. And I'm sure there's people who are familiar with design thinking who are with us in this session. And I was just wondering if anyone else would like to add in the chat parts of the design thinking philosophy that they're really excited about, or alternatively, parts that you find problematic where there's friction. I'll just give people a moment to see if anyone would like to hop in with anything there. And I'll just go on to the next screen while I'm seeing if anybody has anything about design thinking they'd like to share. So here are some of the tools of design thinking. So there's visualization, using data converted into some sort of visual form as a prompt for our users and our team members. Hopefully there's a blending between those categories to be able to talk about what's important. There's an activity called journey mapping, which is basically putting on paper the processes somebody goes through when they're engaging with an experience or a product. There's mind mapping, where we draw and link concepts. Prototyping is really important, making something and showing it in a rapid format. And there's a question mark there because there's always innovation happening with tools. And part of the design thinking philosophy is that there's acceptance that these tools are going to be modified, and that's really exciting. So we come to thinking about design thinking at VU and why we are so keen for our students to know design thinking. And Felicity talked about the values of flexibility, and these are reasons that are important to me as well. So I love the quote from Mazzio, a bit researcher, that when everyone is a digital designer, the role of a practitioner is to help other people's design. And there's work in the digital humanities research area that if technology is a double-edged sword, that it can be problematic and also enabling, we need people to be able to get in there and make projects to be able to discover these problematics and also to be able to use these tools for good. It's also a very useful skill set for the future. I teach with Nick Petch, Head of Learning Innovation at the ID Crowd, and he talks about how students need to have convergent and divergent thinking and better switch between the two, and also reflection skills. So skills that people can work alongside digital systems and with each other. And we also want students to be able to, if they see an opportunity or an idea they have in mind to improve the world, that they know how they can go and gather evidence to explore the idea and present that to other people and get other people involved. We want them to have experience as a collaborator. So what are the, and maybe this is a form of digital literacy, how do we all work together virtually? Okay, so this is some student work that I'll show you to be able to give context to what design thinking is. This is an example of the journey mapping that I mentioned earlier. This student here is looking at how students start a new unit at university. Block is a certain way we teach at VU, and we see that this student has divided these columns into looking for a classroom, finding a classroom, looking for a restroom on break, getting confused about where you are, being late, and then trying to leave the class. And something that works well for me and why I'm using this as an example is I love this little detail here. Like everyone's been there, right? And those nuances of everyday experience is where we can find this richness of design. And a way designers and practitioners of design thinking use these maps is to spot what's called pain points. So where is there a problem and where can we use design to continuously improve? So for instance, perhaps we need to be improving signage to be able to help people find their way back and help people not to become disorientated. And a quick tangent here. I had my vaccination done at Sunshine Hospital and the signage was beautiful. And I had a chat with the nurse who gave me my injection. And she said the person who was in charge of that was always every day trying to fix it. And that's why there were so many signs upon signs. That it was wonderful because we certainly knew where to go when we left. And this row here, the emoticons, gets across quickly where this person was coming from. So this is a picture of how we used to go about looking at journey maps before COVID. We'd work together, we'd brainstorm in a room, and you can see here these columns here of before, during, and after an event, and how we'd all map these ideas together in one place. And now this practice is moving more and more online, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment. This is an example from an education student, and why I'm showing you this one is how these artifacts are a design object in themselves. They're beautiful, excuse me, and how much they can be adapted. So this person is mapping out a classroom and how different students and the teacher feel at different points in a class. And this student used this journey map process to come up with the idea of a tool that helped a teacher address students at all sorts of different abilities at the same time. It was quite a nifty piece of paper that was a concertina. So this is an industry example from Jasmine Hamid, who teaches with us. And I'm showing you this example to show you how industry works with the design thinking process, and also how much you can work away from that classic empathy, define, etc. cycles that we were looking at earlier. So you can see here that she's got this discovery stage, a defining stage, a design and test point. And in order to make her journey map, she undertook lots of interviews and used that data, qualitative data from the interviews, to be able to construct her journey map. And then this is the result of her work. I know that that image is too small for you to be able to see the detail, but as an overview, you can see how she's categorized her ideas and then asked people to vote. And we also see her learnings from this process. So she's used a tool called Miro. Excuse me. And Miro is one of the online tools that have become very popular as we've had to work out how to work together online. The tool I use is Miro. I'll be talking about that in a moment because I would recommend that one because it has free licenses for educators. I'll come back to that. And she talks about how co-design has to be this quality engagement rather than quantity. And I love this point where she talks about how we need to be adaptive to the needs of our users. And of course, the way they want to engage online is going to differ, and that we have to keep an eye out to be able to change our strategy. For instance, maybe someone's a visual learner, or maybe they prefer to give feedback in a written format, maybe it's anonymous. Just being mindful to those elements. Okay, so this here is a image that was floating around my social network feed on the weekend. It was probably in yours, and it's Tesla talking about how they're going to be introducing robots. So not a particularly imaginative way of thinking about robots, I would argue, but why it's interesting is that this seems to be what the next technology that's going to come into our households is going to be. And this is where we want our students knowing how to get files on that and being able to do something with them, which leads us to our next topic, using social robots to teach design thinking skills.
Thanks so much, Tash. And thank you for going through a couple of those examples that detail just how flexible the different design thinking tools are. Obviously, we're not teaching those particular tools today. This is just an introduction, but it is something we will be looking at doing in the future. And we would definitely encourage anyone to reach out to us at the end of this presentation as well to have a chat about any of those. So, oh, Tash, if you just want to go back to good old technology. So part 2 of our Breaking Barriers with Technology series will focus on using social robotics as a hands-on tool to teach design thinking skills to students and currently employed staff. So once we are officially allowed back on campus, which we're all looking forward to, VU Polytechnic will be running a live streamed hands-on session utilising our social robots at our Sunshine Skills Hub. At the end of this presentation, we'll close out with a little bit more detail on this, but for part 1 today, we wanted to provide a bit of an overview of how we've used these robots and technology before, and also get some ideas from our attendees as to how they can be used down the track. So at VU Polytechnic, we've used social robots over the past few years as a tool to learn multiple different skill sets. I'd also like to acknowledge that a couple of the people who are attendees here today have actually been instrumental over the past sort of 5 years in building some of this technology into our programs and piloting it. So I want to say a big shout out to those that are here and you know who you are. It's not so much about the technology itself, although that is important, but it's more about using the technology as an accessible means to learn critical skills such as design thinking, coding, problem solving, as well as things like collaboration. So a lot of those type of soft skills or human-centered skills that employers are asking for that can be flexible across a lot of different sectors. So this type of technology is incredibly user-friendly, it's very accessible, and most of all, it makes learning really fun, which is one of the things we're trying to do. So some examples of how the Polytechnic and also the Wyndham Tech School, who is situated at our Werribee campus and works very hand in glove with the Polytechnic, have used social robotics in an education environment before, includes our amazing Wyndham Tech School programming Pepper, who you can see in the picture there, a social robot from our partner SoftBank Robotics, to actually meet and greet people at vaccination hubs very recently in Wyndham. And Pepper actually took over doing a lot of the tasks that, as Tash had pointed out before, can be incredibly repetitive for people when they're coming in. So that might be, you know, asking the questions of, do you have any cold or flu symptoms? You know, are you feeling unwell? Have you been into any, you know, areas where, you know, you've like hotspots for COVID, tier 1 areas, that sort of thing. And apart from the fact that it allowed staff to actually free up their time to do what people were really good at, which is really, really engaging with others, it also was a really nice feel good for people who were waiting for quite a long time in line. It was very successful. We've also had social robotics used to run exercise classes for primary school students with special needs. So the Polytechnic students actually use the robots to code them to run a certain series of exercises, and then those what actually happened, and oh, sorry, Tash, just back to the one with Pepper on it. Yep, perfect. What those students then actually did was they were taking those robots, and the students who had the special learning needs, such as high-grade autism, were learning from the robot instead of the students, and actually engaged incredibly well with a robot in front of them instead of a human facilitator. We've also had our early childhood education students program these robots to engage with preschool children and play flash games, etc. Thanks, Tash. So just a quick exercise for you, and I'd encourage everyone to participate in this one in the chat. If you could type some ideas for how you think something like social robotics could be used in either your job, in education, or just in general in life, you might have sort of looked around and thought, oh, that could be pretty cool. There's no wrong answers. So as an example, social robots have been used globally as concierges in hotels, banks overseas to greet guests. We even have robots making ice creams at Federation Square in Victoria. So they are currently working in aged care homes as providers of sort of, care and allowing elderly people to sort of, interact with someone when they don't have visitors. So I'll give people maybe sort of 30 seconds, even if you want to pop 1 or 2 ideas. And as I said, there's no wrong answers. It's amazing the type of solutions this type of technology can meet. Reminder to scan QR codes at entry points is a really, really good point, Maria. And I think it would be a lot more people would be doing it when I'm at my local Woolworths if there was a robot there reminding you to do it. Yep, testing toxic areas. So that could be a really, really good one and definitely takes the risk factor out for humans as well. So that's a great one, Marissa. Anybody else, when you think about how, like, either something you might have seen before or how you think maybe a robot could be used in something you do or something other people do or people around you? And this is probably a good one if you think about other people's needs, which is definitely the design thinking mentality. How do you think these could be used to meet somebody else's need that you might know of? That might be elderly parents, it might be your children. Yeah, absolutely. John, that's a really, really good one. Companionship for people in isolation. One of the ones someone pointed out to me the other day was entertaining children at home during homeschool so that parents don't have to. I was like, that would be a pretty good one. Do the shopping. Katrina, yep, that would be brilliant. Translating foreign languages. Yeah, really, really good point there. And that would be amazing. And when you look at the artificial intelligence that sits behind this type of product, translating foreign languages is actually not something that's too far off for these type of robots to be able to do. So please feel free as we keep progressing to pop any more ideas in the chat. It's great just to hear other people's ideas and get people talking. Just if you flick the next slide, thanks, Tash. It's not always easy to be collaborative on Zoom and to share ideas. And as you can see, trying to go through and pop things in the chat, and it can be intimidating for people. And, sometimes, you're not sure whether you should share something as opposed to when you're sitting in a room having a discussion. So a big part of design thinking and doing things differently is about collaboration and also having the space to flex those creative muscles. So our Sunshine Skills Hub Level 1 innovation space is the perfect spot for us to bring industry, students and staff together to learn design thinking through this type of technology. The hub provides access to the latest tech, such as our social and collaborative robots, as well as a really unique setup that includes rooms that are actually built to follow the design thinking principles. So there's an ideation room, skills development room, and a prototyping room. Our future workshop, or part 2 of this series, will actually be based in this space, as well as being used for further collaboration between our higher education and vocational education departments to allow VU students to design innovative ways to use social robots in their own learning and others' learning. So we're looking at how to put students in the driver's seat and challenging them to help us co-design and co-create the learning of tomorrow. Over to you, Tash.
Thanks, Felicity, and apologies for the crazy slide driving earlier. So how are we going to ask students to approach design thinking? How are we going to gather input? We're very keen for students to be the designers, the methods that we're going to apply. And of course, this is a highly employable skill because it demonstrates that students can apply a methodology in a new context and be able to work out what is it that we need to get in and find out what are the nuances of a user group's everyday experience. It's possible that we'll use a chatbot as a data gathering tool to be able to see how people want to chat when it's not to a person and there's that affordance of anonymity. So we'll be asking them to think about different ways to work on these empathy points, defining the problem points, ideating points, prototyping, testing, and we'll be going around in different cycles of iteration. And I just want to show you an example of how students are fantastic at adapting these tools. So focus groups, of course, are a really lovely way to be able to get quick impressions of how people feel about a particular situation. And this student here was interested in prototyping an app for new exchange students, and she ran a workshop in class where she divided people into international exchange students, domestic students. She had these different questions, and the questions worked really well. The people in her group were highly engaged, and then she swapped to thinking about the type of language that people use and different translations. What's the language that's important to students when they first join uni, and how can that be a way to be able to engage new students in a relaxed way? And then this is an example from 2 students who were responding to a brief from the Australian Alcohol and Drug Foundation to look at how to minimise harm from alcohol use within the demographic of young people in Melbourne. So these students asked their participants to draw their own journey of a night out. And this is the results that they got. And you can see here already that they're getting a gender difference in a male's experience of going out versus a female's experience of going out. And the result of their work was a chatbot called a responsible friend. And the aim of that chatbot was to be able to give the user advice on how to stay safe, like about transport, for instance, in a way that made sense to young people. Okay, so we now have an activity which is similar to the first exercise. It's a different way of thinking about things. And we're going to use a tool called Planning Poker. I don't know if anyone's done Planning Poker before. I was taught this when I did a training course with Access Agile. It's a means to explore the risks and opportunities of a situation in terms of the resource allocation. And it encourages people to add their expertise. You'll see that in a moment. And also it helps people who tend to be quiet to have a voice. So what basically this tool involves is every person in the room or logged in has a set of cards. We have a way we can do this via the chat, and participants are asked, and the assumption is that people work together as a team. Think about task A. How intensive was task A to complete? So if we say that task A was, let's say, 3 points, what do we think about task B? What is that compared to task A? So it's a way for people to compare different activities that they've done and reflect on that to be able to think about what might work, what might take a bit of tinkering with another task. Planning Poker happens at about the 2nd or 3rd iteration because of a design cycle, because of course we would want people to have a sense of what they're wanting to build, because this is thinking about the prototype space and how we're going to go about it. There's lots of online Planning Poker PDF sheets, and that link over there in the right-hand corner is a place where you can download cards like this. Having cards like this seems like a luxury in the virtual world. So what we're going to ask you to do now is to pop your answer in the chat, and we'll take it from there. So this is the scenario. Your team needs to make fruit salad, and we need to best work out how to prepare the fruit. If a strawberry is a level 3 complexity, what is the pineapple? So we'd like you to consider this question, pop your answer in the chat, and we will be asking the outliers why. So of course, if we were in a room, we would ask people to select their number from their pack of cards or their slot of paper with the numbers on it and put their answer on the table face down, and then we'll take it from there. So any responses to what score is a pineapple if a strawberry is level 3? we'll give this 30 seconds. The most complex is a 10 and the least complex is a 1, but you can go off the scale, why not?
I'm going to go with Penny's 24 because I personally hate preparing pineapple as well.
Okay, so I'd love my colleagues who are here with me helping us look after the chat. What answers seem to be the outliers? Is that there was
if I'm having a look here through Tash, the general consensus either seems to be that it's definitely around an 8 to a 10 or a 6. I want to know if anyone has anything lower than a 6 because I want to know how they actually managed to do it. But generally it's either that 6, 5 plus. Katrina.
Okay, Katrina, could you tell us why you think a pineapple is a 5? Or Claire, too, or John? Okay, sharp knife and Elga. And John, do you have a special technique? So you can see here from, okay, the sharper the knife, the better. Yep, great. Twice as hard. Just peel and slice and dice. It might be that you know of a really good tool. It might be that you have excellent technique. Yes, needs more strength. So you can see how a tool like this can spark a conversation with a team about where the nuances of how we go about that. I love that. 10 times as big, 10 times as difficult, 10 times as sweeter. So there's return there, but they're hard work. That's fantastic. Shall we try another round? So again, a strawberry is a 3, unless there's anybody else who wants to add to the pineapple discussion. Let's try a cantaloupe this time. If a strawberry is a 3, what is a cantaloupe? Four, lots of 4s and 5s coming in, and 6s. Someone's an 8. I think the highest looks like 8 by this point in time. Would our outliers, which look like it might be a 5 and an 8, so the range is a lot closer this time. Those cantaloupes, they don't spark controversy like the pineapple. Would anyone like to talk about why they've given the cantaloupe the score that they have? Easy to peel and cut. When we're doing not as prickly, yes, yep. They're not as off-putting. Easy to peel, yep. That's great. Hey, thank you everybody for participating in that. Still complexity with the slimy seeds. Yeah. They don't come out easily, those slimy seeds. And as Felicity said, when we were doing a practice of this, they're cumbersome, but they're big too. Thank you, everybody. So we're wondering how it would work for you to adapt this technique in some way. Do you see an application of this tool in your work and with the people who you work with? We ran something like this with teachers as part of a Google grant. And one teacher thought that she might adapt it in her classroom to give kids pieces of paper with numbers on them and that they could put them face down on their table. And so when she went round, she'd be able to look at where a kid might be at and be able to work out how to help and how to group kids to be able to help them quickly. So wondering if there's something that comes to mind for you. Just give that a moment to see if anyone's got anything it comes to mind for anybody. So just would like to, oh, that sounds great, Bruce. That sounds fantastic. Looking at how to set up practical assessment scenarios. Yeah, because it's great about, it's a really good way to be able to talk about those practical elements to a activity that are sometimes overlooked, and sometimes people might have really valuable insights that get lost in the crunch of work. So if this is design thinking is an activity that you would like to work on, I recommend getting an account with Mural.com. If you're an educator and you write to them, they give you free licenses, which is lovely. And there's these templates which are good to go. And different companies have put up templates that they apparently work with themselves. And you can send a link to the people who you work with, and they can go to your whiteboard on steroids and start collaborating. And a nice element is people can do that anonymously. So it gives people the freedom to explore ideas without feeling judged. So thank you very much for listening and coming along, and wondering if anybody has any questions for us.
Please feel free to pop any of your chat questions into the chat, guys, while we're sort of waiting. So just to sort of summarize, and thank you, Tash, for running that really, really engaging and really interesting session. We would encourage anybody to please feel like you can take any of the short little exercises that have been a part of this short little workshop back to your teams or to your students or to your family or friends, whoever it is you would like to work with. And please feel free to repurpose those and tweak them to your own needs. It's really great to sort of be able to take this type of learning and then utilize it in a way that supports what you're trying to achieve. Tash and I obviously have our details there, so we would definitely encourage you to reach out to either of us if you have any questions after this. As it was flagged at the start by Louise and also myself, part 2 of this program, which will actually be seeing a lot of these principles put into practice live with an actual workshop, we'll hopefully be running as soon as we're allowed to find out when we're back on campus and COVID restrictions have eased a little bit, but we are at the mercy of everybody else in the state in the same capacity there. But we're really hoping that we can bring that to you this year if possible, and we will be sending out the link to everybody who has been an attendee today if you would be keen to join that at some point when it is available. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. And if you want to know anything more about design thinking or potentially have any ideas about other sort of workshops that could run, please feel free to let us know. We're always looking for more ideas and to, I guess, practice what we preach. We're not the, the gurus on this. There's lots of people in the world who are, and design thinking is iterative. So we are always welcoming and accommodating to other people's ideas as well.